Hey, hello everyone, how are you doing? I hope you are having a good day and you are ready for some additional fun concerning the blueprint mechanism that we've been working on for the NervLab application, because that's exactly what we have on the menu for today. So yeah, let's get straight into it. As usual, I'm going to try to keep it pretty short, but there is a good chance that I will start drifting in some minor details from time to time. So excuse me for this in advance. Anyway, last time we had already support for a simple image source node, which we have here, and the output node. And now, as you can see, I've been working on adding a few additional transformation nodes. So 4 of them for the moment. And I'm going to try to discuss each of them maybe. But there's nothing really new in fact here, because this is basically replicating the functionality that we already had in the control panel, in case you remember this initial implementation. So there's the blur section here, for instance, which is now this node, which is Gaussian blur, but you have the same settings: the kernel size, sigma value, and the sampling scale. Then sharpness is something that is still missing. I need to add a new node for that. HSV is this one, HSV control, so for hue, saturation, and value control. Brightness contrast missing, pixelation, we have it now, and we have H detection also at the bottom here. What maybe we could start with here is some small interaction with the nodes, because you would probably expect them to just work out of the box. So let's have a try. First thing you probably want to do here is to check what is the original image. So we can just take the image source and we link that directly to the output. So here you have the original image. Okay, a few notes that I'm adding to myself in the process. The display is now completely overwhelmed with those nodes, so probably one of the next step I really need to deal with would be to only add the nodes that I want, and to also support maybe zooming in and out, and maybe also hiding completely the nodes, I mean the blueprint, and then showing it back so you can still have access to the image underneath. Because if you keep adding nodes continuously, yeah, that's going to be a problem, I guess. Anyway, first thing then we can try is let's try with the HSV control, because this is the first one which I have implemented. So I'm going to link this this behavior, in case you don't remember, is normal because we're just unlinking anything from the output, so it's displaying this default image as a fallback. So now if I try to link this one to the output, you get the hue effect apply, because this one is not set to 1. And you can just drag this to, well, change your settings as you would expect. Saturation means that you can turn the image completely black and white, or you can make it extremely colorful. Another thing I should note to myself is that, yeah, on those sliders here, currently it's a bit tricky to control the value precisely. So for instance, if I wanted to set the value back to 1, that's, yeah, very hard to do. What would be good, I guess, would be some kind of reset mechanism to reset that to the default value, or maybe also a mechanism to maybe click on this label here and specify the value manually. So yeah, something to keep in mind. Anyway, saturation, okay, and the value can turn it more brightful or completely dark. Okay, Now concerning the implementation part for this HSV control node, you just have a regular blueprint node and only 3 functions on this one where you can set the hue, saturation and value. Next, for the construction of the widget itself, so we have the definition here for that widget. There's nothing really fancy here, so you start with the title, you just have the output node here, input node, and this is the first row that you are going to add to your window. Next, yeah, maybe something on this point, I have also added now a new custom widget, I could say, which is the slider row, and this one in fact is used to construct directly a row where we have a caption first, then a slider where you can control a value, and on the right you have the value which is reported as another label. So for instance, here the first slider row is for the hue, the range for the value that you can get is between 0 and 2, initial value is set to 1, and you're going to add that as a regular widget, but it will internally construct those 3 sub elements. In fact, if we have a look at the slider row implementation, there's nothing really fancy here. It's just going to create a regular widget, add a horizontal layout to it, and then create the label, the slider, and the other label. But you can still kind of configure how you want this to look, because maybe you don't want to have this final label for the value reporting. So if you set the construction thread value here to false, then you will not display this label slot. But okay, that's a detail. Let's get back to the main window here. Then you're adding the saturation row again and the value row, and yeah, basically this is all there is to it. Now the nice thing is whenever you drag the slider, it's going to trigger this value change function that you are specifying for every slider row. So in the first case here, you're going to modify the hue value on your blueprint node. Otherwise, you modify the saturation or the brightness value. And this brings you to the function that are defined on the node itself. So you have the set hue, set value and set saturation, which are going to update your context parameter with the corresponding value that you're providing, and just after that it's going to run the node. So this is the key part here. Whenever you modify something on your slider, you are re-executing your node, and whenever you re-execute the node, so whenever you modify something, re-executing is going to perform the execution of this node, but also triggers the execution of the following node. So when you're done updating the image here, you're producing a new image as the output, and this one is going to be sent to the output node itself, so you get the display directly on screen. Now for the execute function itself, in fact, I was a bit lazy, I would say, on this one, and I just reused what we had implemented before. We have, in fact, a big function here, which is this process texture 2D, which was already used in the first version, so on the IMGUI display, and it's taking a big context object, and this context contains a lot of parameters. So I can show you that. It's an image process context, and contains this image process param structure, and that's where you will actually specify what you want for the HSV manipulation, but also all the other settings that you could in fact modify in the previous GUI. So you can control the brightness, contrast, the pixelization effect, and age detection and so on. The only thing which is missing here is the blur settings, because for the blur settings we have another dedicated function and dedicated context, so we'll see that in a moment. And so yeah, anyway, not much more to add concerning this processing. On the execution, you take the input image, input texture, then you do some validity check. If it's null, then you don't do anything, of course, and otherwise you might need to recreate your output texture if your input texture size is different from what it was just before. And that's all basically. After that, you prepare the view for the source, the view for the destination, and you call this engine process texture 2D. So pretty easy to do. Okay, so that was the first one that I have added. Then which one? I think the next one was the blur itself. So we have, no, you cannot take it here. You can just maybe take the blur first and then send it here. What was new concerning the blur? I don't think there is much to mention, so we can just maybe have a look at the implementation. And the blur node is in fact very similar to the HLZ node because you only have those three simple functions. Apart from that, the structure seems to be exactly the same. And for the implementation, again, we have a slider row for the kernel size, another one for the sigma, another one for the sampling scale, and all those slider rows are simply going to call the corresponding function on the node. So the only maybe a bit different part is the execution part, but it's not very different in fact. It's just that for the blur computation, you have an additional level of complexity because you have to perform different render passes to perform the different stages, and so you need one additional texture, and you need to ensure that this texture has the appropriate dimension. So you need to maybe to reset this part of the context in some cases, and then only this function here is different, and the context object here is in fact not the same one. It's a blur context, but the structure is again a bit similar to what we had before because we have these blur parameters and the additional low-level engine resources. So you just modify those blur parameters in the node functions. Alright, so I think, yeah, you get the idea already. There's nothing very fancy, and all those nodes were very similar to implement. Maybe just one note on the pixelation, because for this one I had to introduce this new kind of widget display, the radio button support, because I didn't have support for that before. So when I was building this widget, I also implemented the radio button support, and now it's working properly, and I'm pretty satisfied with the look of it. Now, before we look at the implementation itself, let's just describe what is actually drawn for the radio button. You have in fact two elements here. You have a big circle. Let's just disable that. Oops, a bit dark. If you are not selecting the radio button, you just display this big gray circle with some kind of gradient effect to give you a sense of depth. And next to it, you just display the text, but the text is also in fact using a shadow display. It's a small effect, but you have a black shadow under the text. So you have two elements displaying the text here. And next, for the selection itself, you have another circle element or disk element here in blue, which you are displaying only when the radio button is selected. So in the code, that's translated as follow. You have a first rectangular element, but with a radius here, which is going to turn that into a circle, basically, with some specific offset for the paint, and you're drawing the paint as a box gradient, and this is what is going to give you this effect of a small black part of your disk and a white or more visible gray part for the other part of the disk. So that's giving you a kind of perspective effect, a fake perspective effect. And next, this one is for the construction of the inner disk. So that's going to be the part which is telling you that the button is selected or not. And actually, I said that there was one additional element. It's not exactly the case. In fact, there's one first element which is uniform color, so a blue color. And on top of that, you're in fact drawing another disk with this gradient effect. a small gradient effect, turning from completely white to a very light dark color, almost invisible because it's almost completely transparent. So this is the reason why we have this small white effect on the button here. Very subtle, but that's actually making the difference between something looking 3D or looking completely flat. So yeah, the selection part is done with those two elements. And after that, you just have the text element. The first one here is for the shadow part, so there's a small offset to it, so move a little bit on the right and a little bit down. And after that, you have the main text itself, for which we are removing this offset and using a white color instead of the black color. And this is it. Then you can just manipulate the content of those text fields and also toggle the selection for those buttons. And when you toggle the selection for this one, you can make it visible or invisible, and that will define if your radio button is selected or not. Okay, I guess this is a small drift that I should maybe avoid, but anyway. Apart from that, there's also the edge detection, and this one, yeah, I mean, it's a nice effect, but you can't really integrate that into a workflow like this one, because if you put that, for instance, in after the pixelation, then the output is not very nice, and if you put that before, it's not better, because it's turning everything kind of white like this. Yeah, that's cool, because you start from the source image, just apply the edge detection, and the output is producing something I think is cool. But yeah, if I use that as input for the blur, and then I go there, and get it back, well, you're basically losing the edge detection effect here. Maybe the blur is too strong, and here I could reduce that and reduce this border. Yeah, maybe like that. Anyway, the thing I think is really missing now is additional nodes that would allow me, for instance, to provide two input images and then merge them together. So some kind of image blending node. So you would take two texture input and one mixing factor, for instance, and produce one output with that. Because with this, you could maybe start with your base image like this one, and add on top of it the image with the edge detection. So that would highlight some part of it, and then you can imagine pushing it a bit further, and you could have other node that would tell you that you want to do the merge but only on part of the image, and other parts should be left as before, something like that. So yeah, a few additional nodes like that, and I think I'm going to add to enhance the capabilities. And also I have some missing elements from this panel that I should restore, so I will do that. And as I said, yeah, the display is a bit too cluttered for the moment, and you really need to find a mechanism to first only add the nodes that you want, and also then to navigate on this graph to be able to zoom in and out and move and pan to see the image that you have underneath. So yeah, that's probably what I will be doing next. Anyway, yeah, I think this is it for this time. The time is not so long, so that's cool. As usual, if you have any question, then please just let me know in the comments. And otherwise, I'll see you next time when I have something new to add on this small project. So see you next time. Bye bye everyone.